Yeah. So, good morning all. So today we are going to discuss about the remaining portion of your scheduling algorithms. So in the previous session, we discussed about something called as FCFS, followed with SJF. Then we have discussed about priority. And in today's session, we'll just flash some light on priority, and then we'll move to round robin. Okay. And then we will be looking around two things, something called as multi-level queue scheduling algorithms and multi-level feedback scheduling algorithms. So today we'll try to complete the entire scenario here. The algorithm evaluation is nothing but whatever the algorithms we have actually discussed or we are discussing right now based on that evaluation. So this is a small topic here that you people can just go through it. Okay. Okay. So that will not be covered in this session. So mostly we'll try to cover this portion: priority, round robin, multi-level queue, and multi-level feedback scheduling algorithm. In the next session, and today I'll just provide you some notes. I mean some questions. You people just practice it. And tomorrow we will be discussing those problems related to these particular scheduling algorithms, so that you people can have a clear clarity of how to solve these problems if they are given in different scenarios. Okay. Now, so the first thing, so we were discussing about priority. We'll just have a revision part related to your priority, and then we'll go to the next one. So priority scheduling algorithm in this, what he's saying is that every process will have a CPU burst. We'll be given a set of processes, and every process will have a CPU burst. Apart from that, it will be providing a priority to each and every individual process. Basically, what happens here, this priority means why this priority is been provided here is based on the priority, the system will decide which process should be executed first and which should be executed later. Okay, let us suppose one process is already executing in the CPU and suddenly another process comes in. It's very urgent, something like it is having a highest priority. Then what the system actually has to do is it has to stop that particular process which is already executing. It has to remove it, and it has to allocate the new process which has the highest priority to this particular what we call CPU, so that it can complete its task. And once this process is completed, then the process which has already been preempted, that should be brought back and it should be given to the CPU so that it can start executing. So here basically priority is most important, and here we can use it as a primitive and non-primitive. Well, the example which we are going to see in the coming slides, that will be focusing on non-primitive. Okay, so primitive also we can do it up. I'll just explain it how it will be done, but mostly we'll see the non-primitive part. Next, so the problem, okay, so here in priority, well, one more thing what I want to say is this is almost equal to your SJF algorithm, whatever we had discussed. But only thing is priority in this case is the inverse of your SJF. So in SJF, what we are doing, the one which is having the shortest CPU burst, that we are executing it, isn't it? But here what is saying priority is nothing but it's the inverse, means the higher the CPU burst we are having, the lower will be the priority. The higher the what we call the lower the CPU burst we have, the higher will be the priority. Let me explain it. So let us suppose we have three processes here, P1, P2, and P3. Okay, and if you talk about P1 here, this particular process P1, this P1 is having some value, something called as 3. This is having some 4. This is having some 2. And whereas coming to here, priority, what we call, mm, yeah. So here, what is saying, actually, we are not giving priority. This is similar to your SJF. Now, what is saying in this particular scenario is, let us suppose this 4. 4 is what we are saying. This is having more CPU burst. So, which one first? If you are applying SJF, which one you will apply first is nothing but P3, because it is having the lowest CPU burst. So, based on this, what you are doing, you are giving more priority to P3 rather than P2 and P1 in SJF. So, what happened here? The lower the CPU burst, the higher the priority you are giving. So same way, that is what is saying here. Priority is nothing but it's the inverse of your SJF. The priority P is nothing but inverse of your next CPU burst, whatever we are saying. So which one is having lowest? Based on that we'll give. Let us suppose 3. So 3 is given the second priority as 2. Why? It is having the lowest CPU burst. The higher the CPU burst, the lowest will be priority. So what is the priority for P2 here? 3. So this is what he is saying exactly in this case. But there exists some problem related to this particular scheduling algorithm. That is what we call it as starvation. So what do you mean by starvation here is nothing but, let us suppose a stream of high priority processes are coming and that are getting executed. We have bulk of processes, all are having highest priorities and these are getting executed. Then what about the low priority process? He's not getting a chance to get executed. He's not getting CPU so that he can complete his task. That's what we call it as starvation here. So we have also taken an example of something like, a queue, a big queue in Simachalam during festival season. Suddenly, as I told you, some VIP person came. So what they will do, they'll keep the general audience aside. They will make them to starve there so that these people can do the work. Means high priority process came. After that, if some MLA is coming, then he will be given the priority when compared to us. So low priority processes, nothing but audience was standing in the queue. So in this case, again, Chief Minister came, PM came, cabinet members came. So this way, what happens automatically? The particular people, audience who are standing in the queue, they will be suffering a lot. They may take, maybe it may take a whole day for them to stand in the line. It's highly impossible, right? So that's what I'm saying. So that is what comes. So how these people can get a chance to do the task completely means here we are using a technique called as aging. So the solution for this is aging. What this aging actually does is, whichever the low priority process is there, it will try to increment, increment in the sense based upon priority I'm saying. It will try to increment the priority of that particular process every certain time. Okay, maybe like 15 seconds, 15 minutes, whatever it is. Let us suppose, I'll explain with example. We do have some processes. We have priorities from 0 to 127, let us suppose. We have some processes like, okay, so all these processes are given the priority from 0 to 127. So 0 represents your highest priority and this represents your lowest priority. Then how? Now how the system works. So here what happens, this particular lowest priority process, whichever is there, he may not be able to get a chance. Why? Because from 0 to 126, there might be more processes coming in between which are having highest priority compared to this particular process. Then he will not be able to execute. Now what this aging will do is, for every certain amount of time, it will try to improve its priority. Like for example, every 15 minutes, let us suppose the priority of this particular, let us suppose this is a process P127 and he is having a priority initially 127. So after 15 minutes, this particular P127 priority will become 126. Okay, we have increased the priority. Even though the number is getting decreased, but we are increasing the priority here. Now after every 15 minutes, the process 127 will have a priority of 125. So on. And finally a stage will come, then this particular priority will, this particular process will have a priority 0. Then immediately this P127 will be allocated to a CPU. And he will start performing its operation and it will just come out from that particular scenario. So this is the way we actually try to overcome this particular problem. Okay. Yeah, let's take a small example related to this. So here I have given you the set of processes P1 to P5 and every process is having a burst time. Now apart from that, as I told you, see the arrival time for all these processes we are assuming at 0 milliseconds. Okay, so all have come up at that time and every process is having a certain priority. Now based on this priorities, what we are going to do is we will be sorting it out. So which one is having the highest priority here? So obviously which one? Priority 1 is the highest because in our subject we are assuming that the lowest number represents the highest priority. So what is the lowest number we have here? 1. So this is the highest priority. So I'll just draw the Gantt chart here, then we will show you graphically here. So we are starting at 0 time milliseconds since all have arrived at 0 milliseconds. Now P1 is having how much? P1 having priority. Okay, so first is P2. So we will be allocating P2 here. So P2, what is the burst time? We have 1 millisecond. So it will execute first. This is a non-primitive. So once the process is allocated, it will come out only once the task is completed. So it will be 0 to 1. Next priority is here, this one, priority 2. So P5. So immediately we will allocate to P5. Now P5 is having a burst time of 5. So 5 plus 1 is 6. So here it is something 6. So after this completes, then we'll go to P3. So the burst time of P3 is 10 milliseconds. Even though we have a priority 4 which is 2 milliseconds, we can't go that because this process is having the highest priority. So I'm allocating this P1. So this is somewhere here it will come up. So it will be 16. 10 plus 6 is 16. Then fourth priority P3. How much time it is going to take P3? 2. 16 means it will be something 18. Okay, which one is completed? P3 is completed. Next, finally, P4. Okay, P4 is here 18 and this is something like 19. Is it correct or not? We have to check it out first. So 0 to 1, so okay, so 0 to 1, then we have 0 to 5, so 5 plus 1, 6. Then we have third priority 16, then we have what we call 4, P2, 18, 19. Okay, fine. So, so this is the Gantt chart, what we have got it, Gantt chart, Gantt, Gantt chart. Now here, what is the waiting time for the process P1? We need to determine. So waiting time for the process P1 is 6. It didn't execute before now, so we don't have to consider that. It will be 0. And since all have arrived at 0 milliseconds, 6 minus 0 will be 0, 6 only. So 6 milliseconds. Then process P2. So it came at 0 milliseconds. Process P3, 16. Process P4, 18. So finally, the average of this will be giving you the average waiting time of your this. Same way coming to the turnaround time. So P1 will have how much P1 will have is 16 because there is no arrival time. 16 minus 0 is 0. 16, sorry. Next we have P2. So if you talk about P2 here, P2 is having, okay, it's 1. P3. What about P3? It is having 18. And same way P4. It will be having 90. So average of this will give you the average turnaround time for your entire process. Let's see pictographically. Yeah. Okay, fine. This is what we got. So I think if people understood now, this is the diagram what we got. I've shown you. So here the waiting time for the process is 16 minus 0. Why we are doing 0 is nothing but arrival time here. Okay, actually we need to consider whether it has executed previously or not. But definitely previously it will not execute in this because it's a non-primitive. So here 6 minus 0, 16, 0 minus 0. So this is the waiting time. So all, as I told you, all these particular processes have come up at time 0 milliseconds. All have come at 0 milliseconds. No, so we don't have arrival time here. So based on that, this is the value. In case you have arrival time here, something like 1, 2, or 0, 3, 4. Based on that, you people have to follow. So here we need to replace the 0 with the respective arrival time. Okay. So this is the way it actually works. Next, turnaround time. So the turnaround time is also same, 16, 1, 18, 19 and 0, 6 milliseconds. Then finally what we need to do, average of it. Okay, so we have five processes. Well, I did not write that. So here the 5 processes we are going to do, and based on that we are going to calculate the average. So it is 8.2 milliseconds the average waiting time, and the turnaround time is around 12 milliseconds. It's very easy. The next one what we have is round robin scheduling algorithm. Well, this particular algorithm is similar to your SPFS algorithm. Yeah, it is almost equal to your SPFS algorithm. But the only difference here is we are going to use a specific term called as time quantum. Well, we can also call it as time slice. You can either call it as a time quantum or time slice. Basically, this is nothing but a small portion of the time that is allocated. So here mostly round robin scheduling algorithm is used in time sharing systems. It is actually used in time sharing system where the entire processes will share the time. Means every process will be allocated certain time and within that time they have to complete the task. In case they are not able to do it, interrupt will take place and that particular process has to come back again to to start executing from the place where they have stopped. So that comes under here round robin. So that is time sharing. So here we use a term called time quantum. So this is also called as time slice. This is a small portion of a time which will be allocated, means given to the CPU, the processes which can execute for certain amount of time. Now usually it is in the something called as 10 to 100 milliseconds that we have. Means the value of Q may be 10 milliseconds, it may be 11, so on up to 100. In between it can be. So, sir, how much will be the time slice for our system? Well, we can't assume that or we can't determine that. We can only find it out using your system's manual. You will be given technical specifications. In that, if your system is a time sharing system, then there it will be specified that it will take a time quantum of so many milliseconds or nanoseconds or whatever it is. Basically, finding it up is very difficult. We need to write very complex codes for this. Then only we can try to determine. So here this based upon the time quantum, what happens, every process which comes up, we will be allocating this process that particular time. So within that time, whenever the CPU is allocated to that particular process, within that particular time, that is nothing but Q, that process has to execute. So if the CPU burst of that particular process is less than this time slice, it will immediately complete the task and it will come out. In case it is more than, if the CPU burst is more than the time quantum what we have provided here, then definitely after certain time that time quantum is finished, that particular process will be removed from that particular CPU, and the next process is given to that CPU. So again, where we are going, since we are removing this process, where we are placing it is nothing but we are placing in the ready queue itself. Why? Because from the ready queue, again it will get a chance. When it will get a chance, when all the processes got the chance one time, then again the cycle repeats. It's whatever the queue we are going to use here, it's a circular queue. Like, first initially process P1 is a, we have allocated to the CPU. We have given a time of 5 milliseconds. So, but he has a CPU burst of 6 milliseconds. So 5 milliseconds task will be completed in CPU. Still he requires 1 millisecond to complete it. But since we have given the time limit of 5, we will remove this process P1 from here. So what is the next process we have? Let us suppose P2. That process will come here. We'll remove that particular P1 and again we'll place it in the tail P1. So we will be having here something P2. P2 have I forwarded it. Here we have P4, P3, P4 and P5. So when all these processes get the chance for the first time, then again this particular process will come here. Then we will allocate to this CPU. Now the CPU, how much time when this is allocated, again how much time it requires to complete the task? It requires only 1 millisecond. Why? Initially it has completed 5 millisecond task and he requires 6. So only 1 millisecond task is required. So that he will complete it and then he'll come out of it. So this is the way the whole scenario works. Let's see with the help of example so that you can understand that very clearly. So basically, you might have understood the way I'm saying here that we will be removing that particular process. Okay, whenever the time slice complete and the process haven't completed its task. So that's why it is purely a primitive scheduling algorithm. Okay, now here he has given a formula here. So the formula is that if there are n processes in the ready queue, so n process is nothing but let us suppose P1, P2, P3. So how many processes we do have? 3 processes. So n is equal to 3. What is saying is if there are n processes in the ready queue, 3 processes we are assuming here. Okay, and the time quantum is q. So let us suppose q is equal to 2. I am giving time quantum. The time slice I am taking here is 2 milliseconds. Then each process gets 1 by n of the CPU. So every process will get how much time? How much portion of CPU? 1 by 3. And each portion will be of how much time? 2 units. That is what is saying in this particular. I'll explain it once again. What is saying is if there are n processes, let us suppose I am taking 3 processes. 3 processes are generated in my system. Now every process I will be giving only 2 seconds of time. Milliseconds or 2 seconds of time. So within 2 seconds the process P1 should complete, then 2 seconds P2, then 2 seconds P3. If P1 is not completing in 2 seconds, I will remove it after 2 seconds, place it here, P1. Okay, so whenever he will get next the remaining portion, he will try to complete the task. So if we have given n and q, so every process will be getting how much amount of time is q time. Q. Okay, means what is saying the CPU, how many CPUs we have? Single CPU. Since we have 3 processes, each process will get how much share of the CPU? 1/3, isn't it? If there are 4 processes, 1/4. Okay, if there are 5 processes, 1 by 5. I think you can understand 1 by 5. So we have 5 processes. So 1 by 5 plus 1 by 5. Like that, if you write it for 5 times, so automatically how many processes we have? You can get it. This is something like 5 by 5. So that is equal to 1 CPU. So this is the CPU we have. So if we have 3 processes, every process will get a share of 1 by 3. Now this 1 by 3rd share, whatever is getting, what is the time we are given for this means? Q. That is nothing but 2 seconds. So every 1 by 3 of every process will get 2 seconds of time. That is what he means to say here. Then how much time this process has to wait? Now this process is executing. What about this process? How much he has to wait is nothing but n minus 1 into q time units he has to wait. So 3 minus 1, how much? 2 into So what is the time count slice I given 2? So 2 to the 4. So every process will wait only for 4 seconds or milliseconds amount of time to get a chance to enter into CPU. So that you can see how much less time we are having. So that's the reason we never come to know that our process is executing one after another. We will only assume that our process is executing multiple processes simultaneously. But actually because of these differences, milliseconds is nothing. It's just like blinking your eye. It takes around what we call 1 second. If you blink your eye, your eyelids, it takes 1 second. So 30 milliseconds means it's nothing. We can't imagine also. So that's what it's saying here. Well, coming to the performance here, we'll be using a FIFO here, FIFO, so circular queue, we are going to use it first and first out. Okay, so let's take an example. So in this example, I'm taking a time quantum of 4 milliseconds. Okay, so this is what the time slot I have set for my system. And this is the processes. I have three processes here. The first process is having a burst time of 24 milliseconds. P2 is having 3, P3 is having 3. So let me explain it how it works now. Initially 0 milliseconds. So these all have arrived at 0 milliseconds. So the process P1 is allocated. Now here we will be having fixed slot. In the previous diagrams, whatever you have seen, you might have seen that there are a lot of variations in the diagram. Like the P1 may be smaller, then P2 might be bigger, depending upon the CPU burst. But here every portion will be of fixed size because we have a time quantum of 4. So whatever the slot you are taking, this is of 4 milliseconds, this is 4 milliseconds, this is 4. So this should be of equal length. Now first I have allocated P1. P1 requires how much time? 24 milliseconds. But what is the time I have given to him? 4. So he will be executing for 4 milliseconds. So immediately after 4 milliseconds, how much amount of time is left? He requires additional 20 milliseconds. But as I have set the target of 4 milliseconds, immediately an interrupt will be generated by the operating system, indicating that the time for this process P1 has completed. Now remove that process. The operating system, what it will do, it will remove this particular process and keep it in the ready queue. So this is a queue now. Now this process is brought here, P1. This part is completed. First time, sorry, let me extend it. Okay. So first time the process P1 is given the task, he has completed 4 milliseconds amount of time work. What is the rest remaining? 20. Now this P1 will come here. So let us suppose this is a queue now. Okay, first in, first out, before queue. So I'm removing it and I'm placing it. Now what is the time he is having? 20 milliseconds. Now what is the next process in the queue? P2. I will allocate P2. Now if we observe here, the burst time what I am giving to this slot is 4 milliseconds. But what is the time he is required? He requires only 3 milliseconds. So he will be coming out before the time quantum completes. Why? Because he is having only 3 milliseconds amount of work to be completed. So 4 plus 3 is 7. He is coming out from that. Since nothing is there, we don't have to keep it here. Next, what happens? So see, this is not 8 now, 7. Why he has taken 3 milliseconds time and then he has come out of that particular CPU. He has released the CPU. He did not wait for 4 milliseconds, okay? So that's why 4 plus 3 is 7. Next, P3 came. So we are allocating P3. And what is the time, burst time for the P3 here? 3 milliseconds. So 7 plus 3 is 10. He is also coming out and we don't have to place. Do we have any other process now here? So no. So no process is coming now. Only one process is left. So what is the process requires here? Total time 20. And what is the time quantum we have? So again we will allocate the process T1. Now since we have 4 milliseconds, after that we need to stop this process. So it will be executing only for 4 milliseconds. So 10 plus 4 is 14. Then what is the total amount of work it is left with now? 16, isn't it? So we have to definitely interrupt here because the slots are only for 4 milliseconds. Even though we don't have any process, we can't allow it to continue. We definitely have to interrupt it. Then we can allocate it again. Now since no other process is there, we can allocate it again. So P1. So time quantum 4 now, 14 plus 4 is 18. So what is the amount we are left with? So I think 4 completed now 12. So again, since no process is there, we will allocate again P1 here. So P1 will take how much now? 8, I guess. So 18 plus 4 is 22, I think. Then P1, okay. So again 4. So it will be 26. So this becomes 4. Finally, is left with 4 milliseconds start. So we are giving here 4. So this becomes your 30. So this 4 is complete. Finally, this process has completed. So this is the Gantt chart how you got it. Now I think you can understand there are multiple P1s are there. Definitely waiting time will be different type. Okay. So what is the waiting time of this particular process P1? Now since we are saying that the arrival time for all the processes is 0. I think you remember the formula which which I have represented in SJF. So what is that? So the total waiting time. So wherever it has recently executed here. So P1 came here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But this is the one which is latest. So we need to consider this one. 26 minus. Okay. So what is the waiting time for this particular process? Total waiting time minus number of times it has executed earlier. How many times it has executed? So except this, calculate the remaining P1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now every slot is of 4 milliseconds, right? So 5 into 4, 20. I think you got it how. So because this previous one, this has executed for 4 milliseconds. Then this executed for 4 milliseconds, 4 milliseconds, 4 milliseconds and 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it will be equal to 5 into 4, 20 milliseconds minus arrival time. What is the arrival time for all the process? 0. And we can either write like this, even though if you're not writing, since arrival time is 0 for everything, not a big deal. So it is something like 6 milliseconds. Then what about the waiting time for the process P2? So which one is the latest we need to take? So since P2 executed only one time, we will be considering the left portion 4 minus. So what is the arrival time? We know 0. We are not considering that. Did it execute earlier here? No, it did not execute earlier. So 4 minus 0, something 4 milliseconds. Then the waiting time of process P3. Same, process P3 also executed only one time. So I'm considering the left portion 7 minus, well, it did not execute earlier. So 7 minus 0, no arrival time 0. So 7 milliseconds. So you can get the average of this. Same way. Turnaround time. What will be the turnaround time of process P1 here? Sorry. What will be the turnaround time for P1? So what will be the turnaround time for P1 here? So P1, wherever it has executed earlier here, the right portion we need to take 30 minus arrival time. Since arrival time is 0, so 30 milliseconds. The formula, I think you can go through SJF scheduling algorithm in the previous video. In that I've already given the formula. Formula is nothing but the latest turnaround time of the process P1 latest minus arrival time. So arrival time is at 0 for everything. So whatever the latest we have P1 executed here, 30 minus this. What about P2? So P2 executed here. So right side. So right side of P2 is 7. So 7, arrival time is 0. So 7 milliseconds. Then P3. So P3 means how much you will get? 10. So 10 minus 0 is 10. So average of that will give you the average turnaround time for that particular process. So I'll show you graphically so that you can clearly understand one more time. So I think this is the diagram what we have got it. So initially P1 we allocated for 4 milliseconds. So you can see there is a small variation here since 4 and here 3 milliseconds. So small variation is there. Okay. So for this, I mean I'm talking about the gap here, the width. The width is somewhat shorter for P2 and P3. Remaining all are equal portions. So here we have given P1 for 4 milliseconds. He has executed it. Then we came to P2. So P2 how much? 3 milliseconds. He has executed, came out. P3. After that we have given one by one like this. So based on this, what is the waiting time we have here total as okay, I have given the formula here too, you just go through this. So here I have directly written 26 minus 20, arrival time is 0, that's why I did not consider it, so automatically 26047. Same way turnaround time is arrival time minus arrival time. So 30 minus 0, 7, this. Finally, you people have average waiting time of 5.6 milliseconds and the average turnaround time is 15.6 milliseconds. So this is the way you people have to solve the problem whenever it is given in your exam. Okay, fine. So next one, we have multi-level queue scheduling algorithm. So what exactly this does is actually we now from here onwards we will be discussing about two algorithms and we'll wrap it up. Now this particular algorithm doesn't have problematic part. This is only explanation. Okay, internally the system does. So multi-level queue scheduling algorithms, what it exactly does is whatever the processes we people are actually creating, those are classified first into different types. That is foreground, background. As I told you, as I have shown you in the previous slide, the foreground process, how we can see background processes, isn't it? So if you want, I'll show you one more time here. So for that, what you need to do is you have to click on, you have to open Task Manager. If people have to open Task Manager, so I think if people are able to see in your video. So if you look at here, these are the processes. See here, he has already written as processes. So these are the processes right now working. Okay. So these are the processes that are actually working in my system. Now, if you look at here, yeah, if you talk about my CPU, this is a memory. This is your main memory. So my system is consuming 72% of the memory. So which process is consuming more amount of my RAM memory? If you want to see, you can see here. So since I'm explaining the concepts using Teams here, this is actually capturing. See here, 682.6 MB is actually taken. The RAM size, I have 4 GB RAM. Among them, 682.6 MB is actually occupied by Teams. Apart from that, it is also having child processes. These are the child processes what we have. Now the child process is also consuming 250.5 MB, 181.3 MB. So this is what we call foreground process. Okay, these are the one which I have created. Now apart from that, we can also have different type of processes like yeah, you can see here memory. So 72% means out of 3.9 GB of memory slot, 2.8 is occupied. Who has occupied more? If I want to show it, means nothing but the Microsoft team has occupied more amount of my memory. So in this way, you people can identify. So here what happens, these are classified, these are foreground processes. Same way we have background processes as well as, so well, background processes are not been shown here. I just changed the settings. That's the reason. These all are foreground processes only. Okay. So these all are foreground processes what are executing right now. So can we do anything for this? Fine. So here you can see this is the main parent process. Within that we have this child process. I have expanded it. So this Teams is actually using two different child processes, 88.0. Same way if you talk about open board here, 85.1, it is also consuming around this, but it is not accessing any my secondary storage device. Only the memory is captured, and whereas coming to my CPU, I am using only 39% of my CPU. So here in this way, the whatever the processes are coming up, they are classified into foreground and background. So background processes, as I told you, will have a lowest priority, and the foreground will have highest priority. So here we'll be having a permanent queues. We'll be using multiple queues here. So like in the previous algorithms, we have used single queues, not like that. Here we will be using multiple queues. And these queues will have fixed scheduling algorithm. How many we have discussed now? We have discussed about FCFS, we discussed about SJF, then we discussed priority, round robin. Now every queue will have one particular scheduling algorithm. Now the top one will have the highest priority and the last one will have lowest priority. Since the lowest priority will be applying here FCFS, because FCFS is lowest. And the top priority is this. So this will have highest priority. So here we will have something called round robin. Okay. Now whichever the process will come, that will be allocated to one of this particular queue, and it is for permanent. Next time whenever you open, it will enter into that particular queue only. It will not enter into other queues. And based upon the algorithms, whatever we have here, like RR, here we might be using priority, here we might be using SGF. This is just an assumption I'm saying. The last one SGF. So based on this, whichever the process will come, we will allocate to that respective queue and it will start executing. Okay. So here, one more point which you people have to keep in mind is, whenever the high priority queue, this is a high priority queue. If this queue is empty, then only this queue can start executing. Okay. When this particular queue will start executing, when these two queues are empty. Suddenly, suppose one of the process from this particular queue is getting executed. Suddenly, one process came here. Then immediately this will be blocked, and he will be given the priority to execute it. When these two slots are empty, these two queues are empty, then this particular queue will start executing. When this is also empty, then finally this one. If any of the queue is getting any process, suppose this one got it, immediately all these particular queues will stop. It will not work. So upper layer queues should be empty, then only the lower level queues can execute. Okay, so this is what the related to your multi-level queue scheduling algorithm. And the only drawback with this is that once the process is generated, it is allocated to one of the queues. Okay, by default, and it can never replace. I will show you the help of a diagram so that you can understand here. So as I told you, there will be a fixed priority scheduling. So here what happens here, generally, like as foreground and background is done, so foreground will be given 80% of the CPU. Okay, and whereas coming to background, 20% will be given to it. That's it. So 80% of the time, the CPU will be busy with our applications, whatever we are opening in our system. But whereas coming to 20%, that will be given to the background processors, very less. So I'll show you with the help of a diagram. This is the diagram. So basically we have here 5 processors here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now the first process, this is the highest priority, the last one. As you come in a sequential one after another, the priority will keep on decreasing. Let us suppose this is system processes, this is interactive process, interactive editing processes, batch process and student process. Student process is nothing but which will be done in the background. Okay, so he has normally given the name. So this is having the highest priority. So let us suppose we are executing round robin. So whenever the process is coming, first it will be decided. Suppose P1 came, whether it is a foreground process or a background, it will decide system. If it is foreground process, then it will be allocated to this. And every time this particular process is generated again, then it will be allocated to this. For example, you people have opened MS Paint. So that is the process. So that particular MS Paint will be allocated to one of these. So since it is an editing process, let us suppose it is allocated to this particular queue. So any time after that, you people are opening the MS Paint, it will be allocated to this queue. It will not be allocated to this one, this. It will be allocated to this particular process only. Okay. If you are doing some kind of programming, so programming means system related process will come. So here it will be allocated to. So next time whenever you are executing that program, it will be allocated to this particular process and it will execute. As I told you, whenever this particular queue is empty, then only this particular process can, this particular queue will start executing. When this is also empty, then this particular process can execute. This should be empty. So what does that mean? If this something we are using STFS scheduling here, in order to make the processes present in this to execute, all these particular queues should be empty. In case this process is getting executed, whatever the last queue we have, in this the process is getting executed, suddenly one of the process came in interactive process. Immediately we'll block this one and it will start executing this one. All these queues should be empty, then only this will execute. Same way, batch process, in order to execute, the first 3 queues should be empty. Interactive editing process, in order to execute, the first 3. But the drawback here is that once the process is allocated to the respective queue, it will never change. So what we are doing, we are actually disconfiguring, like something like what I can give the example is, let us suppose you people, since every class consists of bright students and dull students, right? Yes or no? So here, the dull students means this is something like now I am discriminating them. Like every time, even if the dull student is able to score good marks, still I am giving a stamp that she is a dull student. I am discriminating. So that thing happens here. So even the process may require higher priority, still we have allocated to the lowest priority means it has to go to that particular. That is the drawback of this particular multi-level queue scheduling algorithm. So in order to overcome that, small difference is there. So that is nothing but multi-level feedback queue scheduling algorithm. Multi-level feedback queue scheduling. Similar to the previous one, but small changes will be there here. Yeah. So here also we do have multiple queues here, but only difference is there is something called as feedback. So what we are going to do in this case is, these queues, whatever we have, we will allocate some time sharing, time slice. So every queue will have a time slice. So as we go from top to bottom, these particular slices will increase. It will not decrease. It will increase. So the first queue, this is the highest priority queue. Now here, every process which comes up, we will not discriminate it. we'll first allocate to the highest priority. So whichever process is coming, we'll allocate to the first highest priority. Now here it is using round robin and the time limit given is 8 milliseconds. Now within this 8 milliseconds, if the process is not completing, like in the previous example, P1 was having 24 burst time. So first 8 milliseconds it will execute. Then what about after 8, how much it still have? 16. So 16 milliseconds task he is having. Then he will not execute in this particular queue. We will send it to the previous queue. Okay, we'll send it to the next queue. Now this is having 16 millisecond time. So process P1 requires how much? 16. So he will be executing here and he will be terminated. So this is the way to actually work. Now, even in the second queue, your the process is executing and it is having more time CPU burst when compared to what we have given. 16 we are given. Let us suppose it requires 20. Then remaining 4 milliseconds he will be executing in this. And here no time limit until he executes and comes out. He can keep on executing it. This is what we call it as multi-level feedback queue scheduling algorithm. It's very easy. Okay, so here what exactly does, any process which comes up, we will be allocating to that particular first as a highest priority. Now within the time counter, whatever we have set, if it is not executing it, then we'll be sending it to the next queue. Next queue will have a little more time counter so that it can complete the task. Still it requires, finally we'll send it to the background process, HDFS, and then it will. But remember, the previous one, what I have told you, that will be executed here. What is that? If this particular queue is empty, then only he can execute. If this particular slot, both the slots, this one and this one is empty, then only FCFS scheduling can take place. The processes in this particular queue can execute. If there are some process here, this cannot execute. If there are some process here, this cannot execute. That parameters are therefore show. So this is all related to your multi-level feedback queue scheduling algorithm. Okay, so this is related to that. Whatever I've explained here, that is what represented. So thank you for watching this session. In the next session, we'll start the third unit. Thank you.